Well, I'd also like to thank you for allowing me at your homes for this 18th episode of Season 4 of Esoteric Science Roundtable. And I want to go ahead and jump into the show proper. I don't really have anything to announce this week, so I want to go ahead and discuss today's show topic, which is Lighten Up, and that is a play on words. As some folks that view the show are familiar, I sometimes use a show title that isn't exactly right on the money as far as the meaning or the gist of what I'm trying to get across with the subject of the show. And so I'll flesh this out a little bit as the show develops, but I want to start by mentioning Jeff Contreras' recent show, if any of you folks happen to catch that. His show title was Let the Sun Shine In, and he was speaking about the practice of sun gazing and some of the benefits of basically staring into the sun, and some of the curative benefits and some of the health benefits and mental benefits that one can gain from that practice. And so I do want to incorporate some of the ideas of what he talked about on his show into what I'm going to describe today. The idea that the sun, obviously when we think about plants obviously are stimulated by the sunlight, and that's how they gain their sustenance. And we in turn can take in sustenance through eating plants, and there are obviously other means that we can gain our nutrition as well. And in essence, all life reacts to sunlight at some level, from the mineral kingdom to the plant, animal, we as humanity, and then even above that, if you want to consider the consciousness that extends past regular human consciousness, that also has a definite relationship to the sun. And now there is a definite exchange that takes place between all the planets and all heavenly globes, in which really we can consider other globes as just like personalities, as like humans, that they can interact. So Mars and Venus could be considered, Joe and Jeff or whatever. It's the same kind of a situation, that there's a personality that embodies all of these globes and all of these objects in space that do have some level of exchange. And obviously this extends past our human understanding considerably, but nonetheless we play our own role as well in this interchange and this interaction. And so we can be cognizant to a certain degree of the interactions that take place and how they affect humanity and the lesser kingdoms, and how we can gain from some understanding of these relations. If we consider that the sunlight, as it's broken up through a prism, reflects into 7 distinct colors. And there are other reflections of 7 that find their way into manifestation that back up or corroborate this 7-fold way in which creation reflects itself. And so this is one, considering that the 7 rays and the way that the light reflects affect humanity, there's also other components as well that make the sun threefold as well. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this, but nonetheless, the sun corresponds to humanity in the sense that it is threefold in relation to our having an etheric body, which is our energy body, which underlies the dense physical. We have an emotional nature, and we have a mental nature. And so the sun also has the physical disk that is the radiant disk that we see when we look into the sky. It also has its heart aspect, its inner aspect, and then it has a central spiritual or mental aspect as well. And some may be familiar again with Jeff's recent show, and he mentioned a term, an Indian term called Surya Vidya. Vidya essentially means science or knowledge, and Surya refers to basically solar energy, this heart of the sun quality, and this is something that's been sought after and been practiced for a long time. And obviously that's an Indian term from the Indian country. And again, the idea that the heart of the sun has a connection to our heart inside of us. And in the same sense that the heart in the solar system has its radiatory capacity, and it reflects the energy, it sends out energy, and it exchanges energy with the respective planets in the solar system. And so the way that the sun exchanges and passes along energy corresponds to the way our heart works. And our heart is very much like the sun in the sense that it is a magnetic dynamo in the physical vessel, and that it sends and radiates and receives the blood in the same sense that the sun sends and relays light energy. And so this magnetic or radiatory capacity is the life-giving center, if you will, of both systems. So the heart would be akin to the life center within the physical vehicle, and then the sun itself would be considered the sun would be considered the life-flowing vehicle for the solar system. And so there's a definite correspondence there. There is also a definite energy that animates and underlies all things. And this is given many different terms depending on what tradition you're more familiar with, and some of the terms that some may be familiar with, if they're familiar with the German psychologist Wilhelm Reich, they might know the term orgone, the Indian term prana. Chi is another Asian term, and Agni is another term that essentially means fire. But all these terms essentially relate to or refer to the fire that underlies and animates all things. And so this, again, is something that we can make more ready use of depending on our point of perception. And so there's a definite tie, there's a direct, distinct relation between the capacity of fire that one can work with in the physical vessel and the level of enlightenment that one has attained or achieved. And so light and fire can almost, in a sense, be considered synonymous. Fire, in an esoteric sense, is more, again, something that invigorates or animates or stimulates. The light aspect is more related to consciousness and qualification and the more of the detailed aspects of manifestation. And so fire, we have to have this initial fire to ignite the enlightened mind or the mental condition. And this is, we find this demonstrating itself more so in the race, that we are becoming more and more mentally focused. And just the simple fact that people can, drive a car, chew gum, talk on the cell phone, change the radio station while they're whisking along at 70 miles an hour, that may seem simple and that's no big deal. But if we were to consider these kind of things like in the 1850s, if somebody could just, from that period, could take a look at our fast pace of life today, whisking by and all the MTV edit style that's, boom, 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 and, there's this short attention span theater kind of mentality that we have these days, I think they would be somewhat overwhelmed to see how quickly everything does transpire in the world today. And this is just one example, in the past 100 years or so as to how much the quality of mind has engaged humanity and how it's spurred along our progress in many levels. And so there are certain aspects of this fire or this mental ignition that's taking place that are allowing for certain types of exchanges that, according to esoteric tradition, have been with us in the past, but have taken a kind of a back seat as we go through different cyclic great ages, that there are great ages of Renaissance and a golden age, if you will, and then there are other opposite terms in which we go through a period of darkness. And so some of these more spiritual gifts and these more spiritual inclinations were relegated to a place below the consciousness level of humanity. And so we didn't have ready access to a lot of these means by which to exchange energy. And one aspect that is recurring and is being reinvigorated and rediscovered in many respects is our telepathic nature. And many people are becoming more sensitive. Also, this is another term that would relate or relay to light or enlightenment. As we're able to, through our mental faculties, are able to take in more light esoterically, then we're able to become more sensitive to things. If we consider the physical eye, that the eye obviously uses light in order to reflect and gain the depth, the perception, detail, color, all these various things that the vision can give to us. We can take in through the eye and we can see all of these different details that, again, differentiate things and can give us contrast. We have the same capacity, through our ability to take in light and to be more enlightened, that there's a definite correspondence we can see as well. As we become more enlightened, so-called, then we have a more sensitive nature. Our sensory apparatus is increased, and so we're able to assess things in a quite different fashion, and we're able to maybe if we can think of the Spider-Man comic, have our spidey sense somewhat awakened, and we can be much more aware of our environment. The sensitivity aspect also has another correspondence with the intuition, and these things begin to become activated when a certain energy center in the physical vehicle becomes activated and is focused upon, and that's the so-called ajna center, the center between the eyes. And some may be familiar with the Indian cultures that paint the dots between the eyes, and that is a reminder of that. It's at one level of the ajna center, of the intuition, of our ability to be sensitive and to be cognizant of other things, and again, to get some sense of discernment. Sensitivity and discernment, those terms go hand in hand with one another as well. And this also, this ability to be sensitive is also related to, again, the heart that I spoke of earlier, as it is radiatory in its capacity, and we can feel what another person feels. We can empathize or sympathize with the plight of others. And if we consider this and we really literally open our hearts up and we consider and take in a situation, something that's distressful, or somebody's having a difficult situation, and we really open our hearts literally to what the other person is experiencing, we can at some level feel the person's pain. I'm not trying to borrow from Bill Clinton, but this really is a literal, this is and it's not so readily scientifically provable, but I think in the future, the very near future, it will be more readily recognized that the magnetic rapport of the heart and the sensitivity of the heart does reach out, and it has no bounds. This magnetic rapport is timeless and it's instantaneous. And so the instant we open our heart to, again, some suffering, we instantaneously recognize it. We instantaneously have a rapport, a magnetic rapport built in, and we have a link set up. And so we can set up a point of tension, in a sense, and we can keep a point of focus attached to whatever that particular situation is. And this is another aspect of how consciousness works out as well, as far as keeping a point of focus on any one thing. And certainly the bulk of humanity, well, different aspects of humanity are going to be focused in one or another aspects of their personality. And as I spoke of earlier, we have the etheric or the energy nature, we have the emotional energy or the desire nature, and we have the mental nature. And so people are going to be predisposed depending to one of those major groupings, their point of focus. And so the bulk of humanity are focused in their desire nature, and their main primary concern any given day is going to be related to their own individual wants, whims, wishes, and their own will. And so the desire nature will be the point of focus. And so their sensitivity towards others might be somewhat abbreviated or constricted because their point of desire and focus is going to be reaching out or focused in on, whatever it is that they're looking for. Maybe it's a new car, a new job, any number of things. It doesn't have to be something material either, but it could be for a relationship or things of that nature also. But the desire nature of most individuals is what constantly drives their point of focus. And so this takes, by virtue of that, this becomes our area of understanding. And if we are so one-pointed and focused on our desire nature, in the sense that this is all we think about, if we become obsessed on a certain object or a certain individual, then again, that's going to be all that we know in a sense. We're going to filter out everything else to exclusively focus in on the object of our desires. And this is where we find so many people getting caught in the types of traps where they might be prone to alcoholism, bouts of depression, anxiety, a lot of these circumstances and these symptoms that are cropping up that are more prevalent in this day and age, again, because of the fact that the mental nature is become so acute in our humanity. And so our desire meets and melds with the mind nature. And there's an Eastern term, kama manas, which means desire mind. Kama meaning desire, manas meaning mind. And this is a portion of us or an aspect of ourselves that is, again, it mediates in a large sense between the emotional nature and the mental nature. And as an individual is able to focus and direct their desire, the center of attention or the focus in the individual can change accordingly. And so again, the person that might be so focused in on one thing, like attaining a new car or attaining some material object, will be having, again, their focus of the desire mind strictly focused on that one thing. And there are other individuals that are going to encompass within their desire mind more of an aspirational sensitivity or quality, and they're going to desire to help others, do something to sacrifice themselves perhaps at some level in order to uplift others. And so this aspirational quality kicks in or is stimulated or is invigorated, and then the center of focus or the center of attention changes. And so an entire transmutation takes place. And by virtue of this, we have a fusing. And so two fires, the fire of the heart or the fire of desire and the fire of the mind, can meet and fuse themselves. And so fire can fuse and link and synthesize at a certain level. And this is an example of this, and this takes place esoterically, that we can make this merging happen. And this only kicks in or starts to enact itself when an individual has consciously taken their focus of attention and turned it away from themselves and turned the spotlight without, in a sense. And again, focused away from themselves out into some field of expression, some means of service, or something that, again, is not going to be a self-centered, motivated mentality. And so this fusion can take place. Now, certainly fire can also destroy as well, and this is another aspect of fire as it underlies the entire system, and it may, again, synthesize at one level, and it can cauterize, sear, and seal, or fire can also destroy. Any form that is built up is going to ultimately, esoterically, be built of light. And we are, in essence, more or less a hologram. All things in creation are holograms at varying levels of density. And so by virtue of that light nature, we always find ourselves in a form that is adequate to express the light and the fire that we need to wield at any time in our consciousness, at any time in our evolutionary process. And so we, again, find ourselves in the proper form to carry out the right and proper work at any given time. And then after that work has been completed, there's a conscious withdrawal, and then fire will do its consummating work, and it will destroy, and then this same fire can regather and synthesize itself at a later time. And this ties into ideas of reincarnation and karma, that the economy of this energy is really pretty incredible, all things considered. And also science and physics remind us that energy is never destroyed, it's just transferred or transmitted to another place. And so this is also ties into that consideration, that the energy, the essence of what we are, doesn't ever destroy completely. It always just transmutes itself from one place to another. And so the idea that we can expand our own consciousness, we can expand our point of focus, we can radiate, again, this will aspect, or this transmutation aspect. Once we've made this fusion a real focal point in our lives, we can again have some radiation expression outside of that. And essentially what I mean by that is getting back to the heart nature, the magnetic nature of the heart. Once we have that radiatory capacity enacted inside of ourselves, and it's kind of like the birthing of a new star in a sense. That's another analogy I'll fall back on, that there's a certain point when stars are born that they become ignited. And so this kind of equates to, in the physical vehicle, how certain centers become fired and ignited and enacted. And so we can move forward from this fusion. And it literally is, once we can use certain means to refocus our attention away from our own desires to a larger, more inclusive picture, that there is literally a fusion that takes place. It's very akin to a nuclear process, a nuclear fusion that takes place. And there is a definite amount of energy that's released as a result of this. And so this release, this radiatory expansion, and this magnetic exchange is able to encompass larger areas, and this energy is able to filter out to larger people. And we can see certain individuals, certain members of humanity that have been able to express this light, and they've been able to radiate out from an open, loving heart at some level. And certainly examples like Mother Teresa and Gandhi and people like that might come to mind. And we can look back through history, or currently actually, at any person that is serving humanity at some level, and we can see that they likely have enacted this same fusion at some level in their own lives. And so this magnetic and radiatory capacity, adding to other magnetic and radiatory individuals, can ultimately make a living system of light that can cover the whole expanse of the globe. And that's certainly the hope of many people that are esoterically oriented, that they are hoping to change their own, again, point of focus or orientation adequately enough so that they can become their own radiatory center in their own area, and they can influence some other individuals. Now, getting back to the idea of the sun and its 7 specific ray emanations or qualities, this reflects to fields of service within humanity and fields of expression within manifestation. And so as certain individuals become fused within their desired nature to carry out some kind of service and to also tread at some level the path of return to divinity, that they're going to find themselves expressing certain qualities. One or more of these ray qualities will find dominant expression, and there will be a personality ray that will be demonstrating itself, and there will be a soul ray. And so as the fusion begins to take place and the more spiritual orientation dominates the person's mental attitude, then the soul ray starts to dominate the personality ray. And by virtue of this, there's a definite conflict taking place and a definite reorientation that takes place. And even getting back to the idea of the celestial globes and the heavenly orbs, as they use energy or exchange energy, we also have an opportunity to, I kind of lost my train of thought here, but we also have certainly a similar relation to other individuals when we exchange in this relation. Let me just move on. I've kind of lost where I was trying to go with that. But nonetheless, I know what I was going to say. The ray qualities emanating from these particular planets, they also have this, some are going to express a more dominant soul nature or a more dominant personality nature. And the current condition that our Earth is in, or finds itself in, and that we find ourselves in by virtue of being occupants of the globe, is that we're occupants of a planet that is midway between this transition point, that is midway between, it's yet to reach the full critical fusion point that it needs in order to have a full conflagration across the entire globe, and for the radiatory capacity of individuals to enact with other radiatory natures of other individuals, and for this to be a global phenomenon. Again, the consciousness that indwells any globe has its own goals to carry out and its own will. And we express a lower reflection of that greater will. And the more we're able to reflect that will, the greater we can be carriers of light and reflectors of light, esoterically considering those terms. And so the goal ultimately, or the near-term goal that the consciousness that indwells our globe has, is to go through a certain type of initiation or its own transmutation or its own expansion of consciousness. And so by virtue of this, if this indeed is successful, which really this is something that's to the point where it's kind of like the terrorist attack, not a matter of if but when, not a matter of if but when. It's going to definitely take place and happen. It's just a matter of how smooth the transition is and how, to what degree, to what intensity this takes place. This can be a slow-going, grinding out kind of process, or this can be a fast, almost instantaneous process, largely depending on the focus of individual humanity. And so getting back to our individual focus, as individuals on the planet choose to focus their interest and choose to direct, whatever their desires are, this is going to affect at many levels what happens on a larger scale. And so the more individuals globally that collect and are able to get in touch again with this fusion aspect, the more it's going to help ignite this larger igniting to take place. And so the consciousness that indwells our globe can pass this initiation, so-called, or this it can move through an expansion of consciousness, and we can, by virtue of that, be on the cusp of a lot of more inclusive attitudes and opportunities for humanity. And the ideas of the golden age that has passed by and that will hopefully recur in the future is tied up in these ideas as well. In that, if indeed the right combination is hit, or the right numbers or the adequate numbers meet and accomplish the goal at hand, then this enlightenment of the globe can also lead to some of the things that are considered in Revelation as well, there being a new heaven and a new earth, and that this new enlightened, this newly initiated globe, the earth, will allow for different conditions in humanity to play out. And so there will actually be an opportunity, in light of this enlightening on a large scale, to have distinct, two distinct earths, if you will, in which there will be a separation. It's kind of like oil sitting on top of water, in which the lighter, more refined will be the one, well, again, space and things like that in relation, or that's not really the best way to consider these things, but nonetheless, there'll be one more, more refined aspect of our earth nature, and there'll be a denser, less refined aspect. And those that are forced to, or choose is the better word actually, that choose to make their way through the denser aspect are pretty much akin to somebody that's failed a grade in school, and so they have to make up for their lost time, and they have to make up for all the lost focus, really. And this comes all the way back to the idea of focus, and that as we direct our gaze on our specific desires, this is going to either hasten or slow our progress. And so ultimately, those that stay so self-centered and so materialistic in their nature, time after time after time, that they're not ever able to lift their head up and look around and say, oh, there's another person over there, there's somebody else over there, I need to consider something outside of myself. These are the types of people that are going to be relegated to this having to repeat and this recurring of this denseness. And there are those also that think that they just need to kick back and wait for some rapture scenario and everything's going to be hunky-dory, and then they'll be whisked away on God's spaceship and no problems there. And I think this is an attitude that can kind of cause a bit of trouble. It can kind of get us, it can definitely get us into trouble, because it's not a proactive approach. And I always try to encourage people to be proactive in their considerations, to think. The active process of thinking is a wonderful thing in my estimation. And then outside of that, once you've done some thinking, some serious contemplation on any one topic, decide once you've assessed that, what can you do about it? Is this something I want to pursue further? Is there something I can add to this consideration? Something practical that I can do to alleviate some suffering, or just to bring attention to something? Again, just being proactive, not just in our thinking, but in actually being proactive actively, physically. Some manifestation on the physical plane from that contemplative consideration. And so encouraging people to think, certainly, and then encouraging people to consider what they can do practically. And so this, again, this enlightenment, or this concept of light, and today's topic, lighten up, are dual in the nature that we literally do have to take in more light, or go through the processes, or use the methods whereby we can literally take in more light in order to accommodate and facilitate the larger workings out of the plan of the will of God. Now, that's a very vague term, and it's how can any one person really say they know the will of God? And quite frankly, we really can't know the will of God more so than just to have a little bit of an insight, an inkling because our finite human minds cannot perceive and penetrate and understand to those levels. So we have to intuit what we're able to, and then trust that we can at least gain some insight into the will nature. And so by virtue of that, we can direct our focus accordingly, and we can find the proper focus through our individual will. And then we can also work to engage this lightening process, this process to lighten up the globe. And we can literally have a lighted linking of individuals by virtue of this radiatory capacity through the heart and the head, and that we can, again, cause a real uplifting. And there can be a point where this a true golden age can take place, and that the emphasis can be on again, more inclusive things. And so again, considering the fire that animates all things, that underlies all things in manifestation, is what allows for consciousness to take place. Certainly there's the idea of sentiency and sensitivity, and that we have to, or that we can, by virtue of consciousness and by virtue of this fire of animation, we have our sensory apparatus, and we can be aware of other things. And so this awareness takes place at different levels. Again, certain segments of humanity are only going to be aware to the point that they're aware of their surroundings, and they're aware of their workaday world, and just limited to very, very simple considerations. And then there are going to be those that maybe read the paper once in a while or watch the news once in a while, and they're going to think past that. They're going to think, they're going to extend their considerations a bit past their own hide, basically. And so I want to get back again to some of the methods whereby some of this lightening up or enlightening can take place. The main method, and this is what I've prescribed most often on this show, because I feel like it is the most, what's the best, the most direct way that we have available, and that is through meditation. And this is allowing the light of the mind to focus in. Again, this allowing the searchlight of the mind to focus in and hone itself and direct itself in a particular fashion, so that we can gain some understanding of a larger aspect of ourselves. The numbers of individuals on the globe that are going to seek to meditate, whether that be on a daily basis or even sporadically, periodically, is going to be relatively low, even in this day and age. Certainly other ideas of yoga, which meditation is a form of yoga ultimately, or union. Certainly other forms of yoga are gaining popularity, and they're gaining a lot more mainstream understanding and access. But nonetheless, this process is still kind of in its initial stages, and it's going to still take some time before it really kicks in full-fledged and becomes something that is considered as a mainstream method to gain, again, awareness and further expansion of consciousness. The main yogas that are in practice right now are like Hatha yoga and things of that nature, which focus on the physical vehicle, and they're more for health reasons. The other types of yoga that are the more mental types, there are a handful of different ones. There are some that are devotional. There are some yogas that are based on the heart approach. Bhakti yoga is one of them. The Surya Vidya that I spoke of earlier, the knowledge of the heart of the sun, is kind of a devotional in a sense, but there comes a point in time when we can occultly think with our heart, and the heart is a sensory apparatus by which we can ascertain things, and it's by sending out that heart energy, and it's kind of like a boomerang in a sense. We send out, and then we can receive by virtue of the heart. That at some levels can supersede the normal waking day thinking and our normal contemplations that in essence that the heart may think for us, or that will be the center of our thinking, I should say, rather. And so that's another aspect as well of another another component of yoga. And then there are the more mental yogas, and Raja Yoga is one. That's the kingly science of the soul. Raja essentially meaning the highest or kingly. And then there is Agni Yoga, which is the yoga of fire. And that has only really been available since about the 20s, something like that. And so that's the most recent available to us. And that is purely relating to the mind. And it's a yoga that doesn't involve any posturing or anything like that. It's just basically being seated and meditating and focusing the mind in a proper way. The idea that we can build, again, a lighted linking system between humanity, or among humanity, also has another Eastern correspondence or Eastern term, and that is antakarana. And there's another, that basically means like a rainbow bridge. That's not a literal translation, but that's essentially what it refers to. In essence, by proper numbers of humanity synthesizing through fire, they can, again, cauterize, sear in a proper fashion their intent, and this can hasten this process in which the globe will enlighten or be invigorated or fired up or lightened up. And so this is, again, part of this yoga process. This is something that we'll definitely see more, we'll find more interest among the public in the future. It's something that's really, again, only been introduced for less than 100 years in any kind of popular way. And so it's really yet to catch on. Again, as I was saying, yoga is starting to catch on more so, but only for more so the physical benefits, the health benefits. As far as using yoga as a science for expansion of consciousness and accumulating enlightenment, that's really pretty early on in our humanity. And so, let's see, that's one aspect of that. And so again, yoga, union, we are able to unite the different component aspects of ourselves and are able to make a point of focus. And by using yoga or using meditation, in essence what we're doing is, it's like taking a magnifying lens in which the rays of the sun go through the magnifying glass, and we can focus a lot of energy on a small point, and we can, use a magnifying glass to start a fire and set some leaves on fire or whatever the case may be. That analogy is very similar to what takes place. We are able to, by focusing our attention, we're able to make it laser-like, and we're able to hone that, again, our intent and our will into a really small area, into a very potent package. And so we're able to pierce through these different respective bodies of our human nature. And so we're able to pierce to the nature of the soul, to the nature of inclusiveness and wisdom and understanding. And then further past that, we're able to penetrate into the realm of spirit, or the will nature of God. And this is what was demonstrated in the gospel narratives. Jesus, through Christ, was able to make his will one with the Father, that this piercing or penetrating was able to manifest itself. And so this is another example of light, and how light works in conjunction with consciousness for expansion of evolution. And there are some biblical phrases that I want to borrow from and expand on a little bit as well. And one is, in light we will see light. And this is another correspondence. It can be considered at different levels, but the one definite level that it can be considered in the context of is, again, in light we will see light. When we do the contemplative exercises, the meditative exercises that allow us to focus our attention into, again, like a searchlight, make our will and our intent and our focus quite potent and directed, then we can merge that focusing of light with the greater light. It's like, I don't know, it's like our little light is kind of like a flashlight, and then the larger light would be more like a great search beam light. And so we in essence are merging those lights and making one greater light. And so we're able to borrow from the capacity of the larger light, if you will, and reflect the larger light within our lesser light. And so this is a reflection of what takes place in the meditation process, that in light we will see light. And so as we are able to focus our attention and our gaze at certain levels, then we're able to, again, be in touch with a larger light, if you will, a larger level of understanding. And the mental plane, if you will, is where this transaction takes place. When we're focusing our center of concentration or contemplation in the meditation practice, again, as I said earlier, there's the physical yoga, there's the heart-centered yoga, and then there's the more mentally centered yoga. But the meditation-based yoga is centered in the higher aspects of the mental nature. We have the lower physical mind, which deals with, I want to pick up a pen, I need to go to the store, things of that nature. I'm thirsty, I want to drink. The lower concrete mind will allow us to just move through our everyday affairs and get those things taken care of. But when we start thinking of more abstract concepts, we start thinking of numbers and shapes and energies and quality and essence, then the abstract mind has to kick in, and we have to depend on the abstract mind in order to consider these things that don't have ready forms for us. Again, numbers and things like that we can't, one is arbitrary, depends on what you're talking about, one of what. And so the higher correspondence in mind is what kicks in relation to that, and what allows for the focus of meditation to be centered in that particular aspect of the mind nature. And so our abstract ability allows us to visualize. Visualization is what again, ties back to the desire nature. What is it that as we focus our intent, what is it that we aspire towards? What is it that we seek to visualize? We can use a seed thought or a mantra, if you will, or some idea that we can focus on, and then by virtue of, resting it or leaving it in the abstract space, it can gain light. It can gain some, there can be some elucidation on whatever the subject is, whatever the idea or the seed thought may be. And so from that point of elucidation, then whatever the concept is can be brought back down into physical plane waking day consciousness, and we can consider the impressions or the visualizations that we may have received during the meditation practice. And so this may not be immediately recognizable, and there may be no impression whatsoever. We may be able to center our focus, in this abstract means, and take some idea and work on it at that level, and then we may not receive anything. There may be something very fleeting or very transitory, or maybe nothing at all. And this is going to depend certainly on the point of focus reached and the frequency with which one meditates. So as one is able to, and also using the same spot, using the same area is very important as well, because we can magnetize and charge, if you will, a location if we revisit it time and time again, because we're setting up the same thought currents, we're setting up the same emotional currents, we're setting up the same energy, and so we're able to vitalize and magnetize the point that we choose to set up this exercise, this operation of focus. And so again, using the same place is advisable, and then we can take our consciousness up to, and again, using up to, again, that's all relative, because up is not really, there is no relation when you're thinking about these mind. Mind is everywhere. Mind is not bound to our brain and our heads. Mind is completely outside of the physical nature. And so we can take our consciousness far outside of the physical vehicle and let it reside or rest within ourselves, but at another level of ourselves. And so we're commingling with a higher aspect of ourselves, in essence, and we're having a correspondence. This conversation also is another term that's used. That's another esoteric term that's often used. This conversation will often offer up insights, and by virtue of this conversation, we can gather again these ideas, these impressions, and take them back in the physical. The physical brain, the lower concrete mind, is not always going to be able to exactly translate what was ascertained at these higher levels. And so this is where this gets a bit tricky in the sense that how do you know how to accurately interpret what was derived from a meditation or from some kind of a contemplation or some taking our focus and taking it outside of ourselves to some other place? How do we know once we've retrieved our consciousness and settled back into the physical and our waking day consciousness, how can we be sure that what we've pulled in or reeled in, if we could think about it in terms of fishing, what is it that we've reeled in? You know, how do we know if it's a bass? Do we know if it's a catfish or what? You know, that's a little bit silly perhaps, but nonetheless, we have to determine, and the lower brain nature doesn't really have the capacity to accurately interpret. And so it's kind of like along the lines of dream analysis. There has to be some understanding of archetypes and patterns and some intuitive response as well. And so again, as we see, in light we will see light. As we're able to do this more frequently, we can find our way with reassurance back to the same high level of understanding of the same abstract space, and we can revisit it, and then we can build from there, and we can go even to even greater, more refined expansions of consciousness, and we can take back what we've been able to ascertain from little visits and little excursions that we're able to take. Now again, it is similar somewhat to interpreting a dream, that there are patterns and there are archetypes and there are things that remain constant that we can use to interpret to a certain degree. And our intuition in this case is what allows us to have the greater understanding. And again, the sensitivity that I referred to earlier in the show has also another correspondence with identification. As we begin to identify ourselves with larger expansions of consciousness, as we repeat the process, rinse, lather, repeat, rinse, lather, repeat. As we do this often enough, it becomes again like second nature, and we can become more confident that the intuitive faculties and process is working for us, and we can be trusting of what it is that we ascertain when we visit these, again, these abstract levels of consciousness. This is something that anybody can do if they choose to do it. It's just a matter of wanting to, having the desire, ultimately, as I said earlier. Some folks are going to desire to acquire some material thing. Some folks are going to desire to acquire some expansion of consciousness, some ability or some capacity to extend their inner ability and their inner essence and their inner, again, their opportunities and their ways by which they can sacrifice themselves to a greater and larger good. Again, this fusion that I spoke of earlier, when more of humanity can fuse its little wills with a larger will, then much change will take place on the globe. And we can really, we'll start to see in evidence, in real evidence, some kind of golden age trying to rear its head. And we can truly see cooperation taking place. There's another biblical saying that is, faith is the substance of things hoped for and the evidence of things not seen. And we can easily take out the word faith and put in the word light. And if we exchange those two words, then we say light is the substance of things hoped for and the evidence of things not seen. This also relates back to, or relays us to, again, a more inclusive aspect of ourselves. We can put our little searchlights out and we can gain a greater vision, and our sense of discernment and what we're able to to encompass in our area of understanding can grow. This, again, is a subjective experiment. Each person has to go and do this for himself and has to determine on his own what exactly, what steps to take, how, the how, the when, the why, all these things. Each individual person has to decide on his own. There are a lot of folks on the planet that have some inclination towards some kind of a path to some kind of return to divinity. They want to approach the path of return to divinity at some level. And so that's going to manifest itself in many different levels. There are going to be people that want to attend church services, and that will be adequate and right and proper for them. There are going to be other people that are going to want to take the kingdom of heaven by force, as it says in the gospel narratives, and they're going to want to proactively acquire some greater expansion of understanding, some greater inclusiveness. And this is something that is not conferred upon people just randomly or for idleness. These greater expansions and these initiations and all these again, these evolutionary symptoms have to be willfully enacted and engaged. These things just don't happen in a vacuum, and they just don't happen for no reason. We have to instigate and initiate these processes in our own lives. And so as we build in the proper equipment, the proper radar receivers and all these things, the more we're able to, again, tap into the heart of the larger workings out, and tap into the heart of the solar system, and then tap into the heart of expansion out beyond that point. And then we can relate ourselves to the larger workings and goings on. And so as above, so below, the Hermetic axiom stands eternally true. We are always reflections in our own human makeup of a greater expansive creation. And so as we're able to determine more about the creative process, then we can, by virtue of that, co-create with the larger creative process. Again, some people are going to desire just to attain something materialistic for themselves, or attain a relationship, or attain something for themselves. Other folks are going to be considering what they can do to offer up the sacrifice that will really stir the hearts and minds of many, and that will, move continents. Some lesser sons of God have maybe swayed, a country or a tribe or a community, and then there are those that seek to do this on a larger scale. Some don't seek to choose this, but they just have such a burning desire to help humanity that these things just naturally play themselves out. Again, we can see throughout history those individuals that have done great things, and we can see the light that they've expressed by virtue of what they've been able to imprint on our humanity. And these things stand the test of time. And so we have these shining examples to light the way for us. And we can follow them like torches on a lit path. And we can use these as our own influence to, again, ignite and instigate our own searches and our own, again, desire to aspire towards something higher, towards something more inclusive. All humans desire, that's an aspect of humanity, that's part of our human nature. Everyone desires for something. The key is how to transmute that desire, or to create the proper circumstances in which individuals will want to transmute their desire. This has to be, again, a self-initiated process. We have free will as humanity, and nothing should be forced upon us, although things are oftentimes forced upon us against our will. But nonetheless, we have a real opportunity to claim our free will and use these opportunities for greater expansions, greater exchanges. It's really up to us as to how we choose to do this. It's kind of like my usual thing. It's really up to us, people, as to how we want to make this happen. So I encourage people to consider things along these lines, what we can do in our own lives to increase our expansion of consciousness and help a lot of humanity at some level. It's, again, up to us as to what we can or will do along those lines. I want to remind folks to check out Therefore I Am every Tuesday, 10 p.m., Channel 16. You guys stay tuned to this later tonight, rather, I should say. Beautiful Losers is 10 p.m., Channel 16 later this evening. I want to thank my producer, Chris, for commanding the helm of the Starship Esoterica. We remind folks that we are here every Thursday, Channel 11, 8 p.m. to 9 p.m. And I want to thank all the folks out there that took the time and trouble to view. Thanks, Austin. Have a nice evening. Take care. We'll see you.